Hi, my dearest of family. Today, I will give you a bit of a guideline of how to go about synastry charts. It is something that is a very popular question to compare to natal charts. So, synastry is a branch of astrology where we have got a couple, and then we compare their natal chart, how compatible two people are. And I would like to give you some hints and tips how to do that because I tend to see a lot about synastry questions in Facebook groups and online, and we tend to be fixated about one particular aspect. Like, for example, you have got a someone's Pluto conjuncting your Venus. What does that mean? And then we start talking about, oh, that's a toxic relationship, or this person is trying to control what you do, and so forth. But there is a little bit more to that. So this is going to be a practical video, a teaching video, and I would highly appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, or potentially you would like to make a comment underneath the video, what type of synastry aspects you have, how you usually read a synastry chart, and so on. And also, if you would like to study with me, then you might want to check out my membership program. The first month is half price, so you can check out my teaching style, and then you can learn some really cool techniques which are going to be helping you, of course, master your natal chart as well. But let's get going and talk about this synastry a little bit. So synastry is not just about, let's say, Venus trining Mars in someone's chart. It's about understanding how one person's planetary presence inhabits the house of another person. So I'm going to try to give you a kind of like step-by-step workflow to get the complete picture. So firstly, what I would do is I would place the two natal charts right next to each other. Before looking at certain type of connections, you must understand the individual's blueprints. Place the two natal charts side by side. And maybe when you compare the two natal charts, you have seen that, oh, someone's Pluto is going to be conjuncting your natal Venus. So firstly, look at where the Pluto is in that particular person's chart. And then look at where your Venus is in your own natal chart. Because it's about the need of the other person. So, what type of control, for example, with Pluto, person B would place onto us? If I've got Pluto in the second house, for example, that's going to be a financial control. And then maybe your Venus is going to be in the fifth house. And that Venus would like to spend money, for example, on beautiful things, on vanity. So the person is going to be somehow bringing that Plutonian energy onto your Venus so that you are not control or you are not spending as much money on fun activities. So, when it comes to relationship compatibility, it is important to look at or identify the need of the partner. So, you can be looking at the seventh house ruler of person A. If their seventh house, for example, ruler is Saturn, they require stability and structure within the relationship. Even if persons B has a fun Venus in Leo, they don't meet the Saturnian need. So it might indicate that the synastry won't stick long term. So you need to be identifying the capacity between two people. So you can be checking if one person has a heavy 12th house, for example, or 8th house placement. Then these people experience the relationship much more internally than someone with a heavy first house or the 10th house, because those are going to be more outgoing people. As a step two, yes, definitely looking at the house overlays. The houses are going to determine what area of life, where things are happening. So this is something where most people skip a step. Take person's B planet and see which house they fall into person's A's chart. So if person's B's Pluto is at 15 degrees Sagittarius and person A has a Sagittarius 10th house, person B will fundamentally transform person's A career, public status, or reputation, even if that Pluto doesn't touch a single point or planet in person's A's chart. So the house tells you the department of life that gets activated by the partner's planetary presence. Then, as a step three, you want to be focusing a little bit on these inter-house triggers as well. So this is where you can start using a bi-wheel, for example. A bi-wheel to see a double trigger. So when a planet in person's B's chart aspects a planet in person's A's chart, two different houses in person's A's life are affected simultaneously. So, for example, person A has Venus in the fourth house. Let's say it's in the sign of Gemini. Person B has Pluto in the seventh house in Sagittarius. So, person's B's Pluto opposes person's A's Venus. So, of course, because we've got the house four trigger, so person A feels this deep, possible, obsessive, or transformative intensity of Pluto regarding their home, family, or inner security. But it also triggers the 10th sign as well. Because person's B's Pluto is sitting in person's A's 10th house, opposite the fourth. Person B is simultaneously acting as a powerhouse figure in person's A's public life or career. So the partner, which is the seventh house person, triggers a tension between person's A's private world as well as the public world. Of course, it's going to be very important that you check the rulers as well. So look at the ruler of those house being triggered. For example, if person B's lands a planet in person's A's fifth house, look at where person's A's fifth house ruler is. If the fifth house ruler is in the 12th house, for example, this fun romance will likely lead to a very private, hidden, or spiritual connection or to certain type of losses, for example. Of course, the tightness of the orbs are going to be super important. In synastry, I would keep the orb pretty tight, approximately about 5 degree. And you might want to be focusing on conjunctions, oppositions, and squares. These create that friction necessary for the relationship to have weight or kind of like staying power. Soft aspects such as trines or sextiles show where the energy might flow easily, but without the hard aspects, the couple may lack the glue to work through certain type of challenges. So, one hand, you need to check the natal needs. This is why I would put the two charts right next to each other. You would need to be checking whether person B's requirements are met. So does person B meet the requirements of person's A's seventh house ruler? You would need to be looking at what house it falls into. So which house is in a person's A's chart does person B's planet fall into? Always look at the opposite house activation as well. Note that any opposition also activates the house across the wheel too. And then, of course, look at the ruler chain. Follow the ruler of the house being triggered to see the final output of that energy. So this is a very brief kind of like analysis of how to kind of go about synastry charts. Of course, there's a lot more to teach about this, but maybe it's kind of like enough for right now. But I want to give you an example. So let's imagine we have got a couple and person A, let's call that person as the receiver, has the moon at 12 degrees Scorpio in their fifth house. Let's look at person's B, who is going to become the trigger, has Saturn and 12 degrees Scorpio in their 11th house. So in this case, we have got a conjunction happening between two people. Person B's Saturn sits on person A's moon. This is often called as a marriage glue, actually, aspect. It can feel very heavy, very serious, deeply committed, but it can also feel emotionally cold or restrictive for the moon person because Saturn is bringing the heaviness onto the moon. Now we're going to have to look at where it is happening as a step two. So we don't just look at the conjunction. We look at where person B steps into person A's life. So person B, Saturn lands in person's A's fifth house. So the fifth house is about fun, romance, self-expression. When person B's Saturn lands here, they bring this parental, kind of like this serious energy to person A's joys. The relationship might start as a fun romance, but person B quickly starts asking about the future or setting rules for the partnership, and maybe they are going to be jealous, having it in the sign of Scorpio as well. Remember, the opposite house also gets triggered as well. Since person B's Saturn is at 12 degrees Scorpio, it is automatically opposite the 11th house in person's A's chart as well, anyway, which is about the house of friends or the social circles. So while person B is trying to structure that romance, they are simultaneously creating tension or kind of like a wall regarding person A's social life as well, which is the 11th house. So person A might feel that being with person B makes it harder for them to go out with their friends or stay active, for example, in their own community. Of course, person A feels seen and protected by person B, but also potentially feeling judged or being too emotional or childish in their hobbies. Person B might take over the planning of dates or the management of person A's creative project. And the couple might struggle to balance out kind of like this private joy with their kind of public social standing. And that's the fifth and the 11th house energy. Person B might want the moon to kind of grow up and then focus on long-term goals. So when reading synastry, always ask which house is the other person occupying. A Saturn conjunction in the fifth house is, it's a committed romance archetype. But a Saturn conjunction in the second house is more about a financial partnership and bringing restrictions to finances. So the planet tells you how they act, the house tells you where you feel it the most. So I hope this short video helps you with looking at your synastry charts, potentially with your partner. So I would love to hear your opinion, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.